Hey, welcome back to Common Sense OT Security. Today we will check out the Waterfall 2025 OT Cyber Threat Report. And this is one, in my opinion, one of the more interesting reports from the major OT security vendors. And I'll get to the point why it is more interesting in a bit. But before we go into the details, the one thing that you should always expect from these reports, which puzzles me a little bit, is whatever year it is, they will always tell you, oh, the threats are going through the roof. There are so many more attacks, the ever-evolving risk, etc., etc. So, unfortunately, before you even open the file, you know already it's going to be bad. It's going to be worse than the year before, etc. So this is something to be expected. However, the good news is that the Waterfall report includes their fact base. This is something that you don't see from other vendors. They simply tell you you're all going to hell and there is, 200% increase and there is a financial risk of 300 billion without necessarily being very explicit about the methodology and their fact base. And Waterfall, to their credit, does that differently. And even only for that reason, it's worthwhile checking it out. So let's just dive in. Table of contents, we don't need that. Key takeaways, and then a smaller increase, yeah, but still an increase. 2024 saw a 146% increase in sites, blah, blah, blah. Non-state attacks with physical consequences tripled in 2024. So that sounds bad, right? And we will check out what that means. There were 76 attacks which caused physical consequence on OT organizations. Please, guys, note the terminology on OT organizations. This will become important later on. 37% of all attacks, the transportation industry was hit heaviest. Blah, 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 146%, introduction and methodology. So here is an important factoid in this box here. In 2024, there were 76 attacks that met the strict inclusion criteria for this report. And they call out the inclusion criteria too. So this is all very good. I'm not sure if I agree with their criteria. And so I see a major flaw in how they choose their samples. And that major flaw is that they also include ransomware. And let me see. But let me finish this point. So they include ransomware, ransomware that does not necessarily directly affect OT systems, industrial control systems. It's just that, it's like the colonial pipeline paradigm. An organization gets hit by ransomware on their IT systems. Then they deliberately, in many cases, shut down operations. And then some in our field label and categorize this as an OT attack. I'm not in that camp, just to be clear. Because for me, what's really interesting about our space and super important is how you can manipulate industrial control systems directly. And this is not what this is about. So those ransomware attacks. So it's an attack on IT systems, not on industrial control systems. Unfortunately, they include those ransomware attacks in their reporting, and that somehow muddies the waters in this man's opinion. And you see, as you would expect, the macro trends, the attacks are going through the roof. OT ransomware reported to FBI. Okay. I don't know what they mean with OT ransomware. I would just allege it's ransomware that affects OT organizations. Maybe that's it, because as you will see, if you go through the details, it does not. There is not a single case in this sample where of ransomware attacks that would directly manipulate industrial control systems. But anyhow, that's what you see in pretty much every report. So the diagrams suggest, oh, this is going through the roof. And the funny thing is, if you look back, let's just say you take reports from other companies, etc. I mean, this is what you have been told over and over again, no matter which year. So in 2020, we have already seen similar graphs. So you're constantly kept in that hockey stick situation where disaster is bound to happen rather soon. And now it gets really, really interesting. So in 2024, 87% of identifiable attacks were ransomware. Why is that interesting? Because that means if they have collected a total of 76 attacks, then only 10 of these attacks are not ransomware related. Why do I say only? Because this is a worldwide sample. So their fact base covers the whole world. And if you ask me, I mean, so if you are aligned with me, that's, well, ransomware, we probably don't need to bother with that a lot, because that's IT's problem. That's not OT's problem. And if you're talking about 10 cases globally in 1 year, that doesn't seem a lot to me. But what do you think, right? So to me, I would say 10 cases globally. And even if you would imagine, as they do, that there is that's just the tip of the iceberg. So that's what is on the record, publicly documented, but there's most likely so many more. But let's just say, even if it were, if you would double that number, if you would multiply it by 5 or whatever you have in mind, it's still going to be a very low number, guys. I have to tell you. And just bear with me, hear me out. So I'm not doing this whole thing in order to bash Waterfall or any other OT security vendor. It's for me, it's important to check the whole logical argument that you make, why OT security would be important, etc., etc. And I think that this is not really, it doesn't help you if at the end of the day you point out, oh, we got 10 cases globally that were not ransomware. Then they touch on some interesting context here. Most attacks relate to 3 ongoing geopolitical conflicts: Russia-Ukrainian war, Israel-Hamas, and the Western democracy Chinese gray zone conflict. Of those, if I have understood the report correctly, the Russia-Ukrainian war and Israel-Hamas stand out, relating to their fact base. However, I have to tell you, in both conflicts, which I have followed to some extent, I was not under the impression that cyber would play any role whatsoever. So certainly you can, there was this activist attack, and we'll get to that later. But what impact did it have overall? I mean, if you would just stick with Ukraine, to me, Ukraine was a huge surprise, because I was expecting, I've been predicting that cyber warfare with physical consequence would be a major factor, and obviously that did not happen. So to my surprise, maybe to yours as well, the Ukrainian war is dominated by drone warfare, something that I had not on my radar. I was thinking, drones, that's an outdated technology, right? And everybody's going to cyber now, but it didn't happen. Anyhow, so they point this out, and they have a couple of samples in their database. It's just not something that I would consider of any significance, but we will get to that later. Number of sites, okay. Impacted industries. Okay, and my advice to you is, before you digest any of these breakdowns here with the percentages, check the fact base, check the methodology, and check the validity of the data, because you might arrive at the conclusion that this data is not valid. So, and just because you would say, as I do, guys, the ransomware, I mean, I'm not interested in that. So therefore, if 87% of the attacks that you are reporting on are ransomware, that means 66 of your 76 attacks that you have reported, then honestly, those percentages and the distribution, etc., doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So it doesn't strike me as relevant. Okay, how was it impacted? This is interesting because, to their credit, they split it out that they are talking about direct attack types and indirect attack types, like abundance of caution shutdowns. This is related to the ransomware, etc. Where again, I would argue, well, guys, not really something that costs my sleep. It's out of my wheelhouse. And then certainly we will check out the direct attacks on OT, local or remote attacks, where attack software or manual attack actions directly affect OT automation systems or networks. You will see in a minute when we go to the database or to their recorded data that a whole 4 of their 76 reported attacks fall in this category. Direct attacks on OT, 4 that they have listed globally for 1 year. That strikes me as very insignificant, but that's just me. And then they have, all those other categories. But keep in mind, all those direct attack types, so not ransomware related, that makes a total of 10 globally. Then what else do we have? Impact for cybersecurity programs, blah, blah, incident costs. This is something that they focus on a bit, and you will also see that reflected in the samples and in the attacks that they report on. The GPS spoofing or jamming, and honestly, I have to say I don't get the point here. So you will see when we get to the details what they think qualifies as an OT attack, but I don't get it. So you can do GPS jamming, and it may or may not affect air traffic. However, it is far from being a serious threat to aviation safety, as an example. It's not like planes would be falling off the ground. And the one thing that puzzles me is that they do understand that GPS is not the sole means of navigation for present-day air traffic. So they do point to the inertial reference system. I think they misquote that because it's called the Inertial Navigation System, or INS is the acronym. They are backups for GPS signal loss. Actually, that's not the case. INS is the primary means of navigation in today's airliners, and that's the case for decades. So even before GPS was available. And INS does not act as a backup. It's the primary means, and it can be primed. You can get a seed, if you will, from GPS, and that is refreshed every so often. But even if you totally lose the GPS signal, you can certainly safely continue your journey to your destination airport, because GPS is not required. So you would have still other conventional means of navigation, like radio navigation. You still have VORs and NDBs, non-directional beacons, even though they're in the process of being phased out, but they are still available. And then the other thing that I want to brief you on right away, because we will get to those airline incidents, even if you totally lose your internal navigation capabilities, and you're only looking at that compass, like on a boat, that compass that's in subliquid. You have that in every airplane, and you're left with your no, not really, because the commercial airliner is always under radar coverage, unless they're traveling the South Pacific, or there are some regions in the Atlantic. So you still have the air traffic controllers, and they know exactly where you are. And so even if your navigation is completely messed up, there is never any impact on the aircraft's control systems, like the autopilot or the servos that manipulate the ailerons, etc. So therefore, I just don't get it, and I think they misrepresent how this whole system works. But this is just a side aspect. We don't want to spend too much time on this. A new malware, defensive developments. Okay, so now we are getting to the meat on the bone, the complete data set. They, for some reasons beyond my knowledge, they include, even from previous years, they include the data. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but certainly what we're interested in here is the 2024 data, and here it is, incidents in 2024. So what I'm going to do, in the interest of saving some time, is I will jump right away to the attacks that they categorize as direct OT attacks. But anyhow, even if you're interested in those indirect ransomware attacks, I urge you, please, this is the beef here. So it starts in page 27. This is what you should read first. And then if you conclude, wow, this is valid data, then it makes sense to go back to the beginning and digest the percentages, etc. But this is, in my opinion, the most interesting piece of the whole report. And we jump to the first direct OT attack. It's on page 31. So they expose the attack type, how they have categorized the attacks, and this is the first direct OT attack. Physical consequences: jammed GPS. So this is why I did the intro with the GPS. Jammed GPS for 63 hours total, impacting flights over Europe. 24 hours over all 3 countries, blah, blah, blah. Baltic Sea, inference was spread. Okay, yeah. Let's just say there might have been an issue. There might have been jammed GPS. But guys, tell me, what does this have to do with OT security? I don't get it. I don't see any relationship whatsoever to any control systems that you will certainly find on an aircraft. You have lots of control systems. One a person at Boeing once told me that's a couple of years ago. Ralph, our airplanes, they're basically just flying industrial control systems. I found that rather fascinating. But obviously, zero of those control systems were impacted by that incident here. So the next direct OT incident is on page 34. And it's this one here. In Spain, ransom hub, okay, shut down operations and send workers home. And so this is apparently ransomware. Ransom hub claimed they accessed the SCADA system at Matadero de Gijon, specifically their wastewater treatment systems, which shut down the beef plant. Workers were sent home mid-shift. Production later resumed after systems were switched to manual operation. Okay, yeah, let's just say, yeah, that might be a direct attack. Check the box. I would certainly like to hear a little bit more details on that. However, it doesn't strike me as a big thing. But I might be mistaken. The one takeaway that you would also get from this incident is, hey, they were able to switch to manual operation. Congratulations, guys. That's always a good backup to have. Next direct OT incident, page 39. Let's go to that one. Direct operational impact. Diverted civilian plane, Qasim Air flight number, blah, blah, back to its origin of Tehran. So this is another aviation-related incident. After learning that an Iranian plane was due to land at the airport, Israel's IDF breached the control tower's communication network. I don't even know if that's actually an Ethernet network. It might just be the radios. So and radios is open air, right? So you can just send a stronger signal and then you use the same frequency, etc., etc. Anyhow, so in a cyber attack and warned operators not to allow the plane to land. Otherwise, they would launch an attack on the airport. And the transport minister directed the incoming plane to divert its flight path and return to Iran. Okay, we need to pause here. Guys, you are telling me this is an OT security incident, direct operational impact? And I mean, the only thing that I can interpret this is that apparently Waterfall is no longer focusing on actual control systems and their cyber functionality, etc. But at the end of the day, it's just there was some cyber thingy going on, and then operations were impacted, even though the operations, especially in this case, didn't involve any industrial control systems. No, absolutely no control systems were impacted. And I question the wisdom of this line of argument. If only because, I mean, if I were a salesperson at Waterfall, I would have a hard time explaining to customers how my products, my data diodes would prevent such an attack from happening. So it's just, to me, it doesn't make sense, but you be the judge. I just want to give you some context. And I think it's also important, again, coming back to the validity of the data that they use for their reporting. If you agree that this is a good idea and absolutely this is in our wheelhouse, be my guest. I mean, just that's something that you decide on your own. I'm not making that mental gymnastics here because I'm interested in how industrial control systems can be manipulated or disrupted or whatever you want to call it using cyber. And that is not the case here. Okay, and then the last incident in their list here with direct operational impact is this one here. Again, airlines, Azerbaijan Airlines flight, blah, 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 disabled GPS navigation and transponder, contributed to a crash. This jamming, GPS jamming, drone attacks, but the aircraft contacted ATC. Well, they are on ATC all the time. So commercial airliner is constantly on ATC on the radio. And attempted landing twice, but without GPS, heavy fog. Guys, come on. I'm not buying it because if there is heavy fog, what does that have to do with GPS? If you do if you want to use GPS for a landing with heavy fog, you have lost already because GPS doesn't allow for a precision approach. So if there is heavy fog, you would have to be equipped with an ILS capability of category 3. That means fully autopilot, fully automatic landing if it's really heavy fog. And GPS doesn't play a role with that. So I'm not buying it. I see no documented connection from a cyber attack, as if you would even label GPS jamming as a cyber attack. to the outcome of this incident, which unfortunately seems to be an airline crash with 38 killed. I don't see the connection. Sorry, you lost me with that one. So those are the 4 attacks that they they're categorized as direct OT attacks. And then we have many other attacks that also, if you ask me, are very, very questionable. But I don't want to bore you with that. So what I would like to accomplish here is to make you aware that it's always a good idea when you read these reports, and certainly you will keep seeing those reports, always a good idea to check the factual basis of the reporting. And again, to their credit, with Waterfall, it's very simple. I like it. I absolutely like it. It's just that based on their data, I arrive at different conclusions. With other reports, you don't have that luxury because they don't tell you exactly which data they are looking at. So you just have to trust them that it's real. And unfortunately, I'm in this industry now for about 30 years. They have lost my trust. So I'm always a big fan of being able to check the validity of the data, which you can do in this case. And you are the judge. So if you think that's all fine and dandy, yes, then you would look at the percentages and the affected industries, etc. So their data set doesn't strike me as valid. My takeaway is, well, we are in pretty good shape in 2024. So globally, only a handful of attacks, and those are, as I can see it, not even of any significance. And here is maybe the final point that I would like to make, and that I would like you to take away from this. You know, many people are just getting me wrong when I point out these various flaws or whatever you want to call it. Oh, you know, you're dismissing the risk and diminishing, etc. Actually, that's not the point. So my argument is, guys, your line of argument doesn't build your case. So honestly, I believe that Waterfall does an excellent job with their products. So I love their products. I think they are totally underrepresented. You should use more data diets. It doesn't have to be Waterfall. But so I would just use a different line of argument. And I think the risk is that if you just pull up all this smoke in the air and you include the GPS jamming, etc., with no connection whatsoever to industrial control systems, then you also will or might find it hard to actually make your sale because the prospect was, what does that have to do with me? So that is I find that is something I find bothersome, and this certainly doesn't apply just to Waterfall. That applies to other players in our space. Also, you don't need to throw all that smoke and use the fear mongering. You can and should, I think, build your case in other means that would be more appealing to logic and common sense. And I leave you with that. So if you have the time to go through the Waterfall report, start with the appendix first. See you next week. Bye-bye.